October 14, 1943, morning over Eastern. England is cold and colorless. At RAF Thorpe Abbotts, ground crews move like ghosts through the fog. The smell of oil and cold metal fills the air. B-17 flying fortresses sit in rows along the runway. Their aluminum skins dull under the gray sky. Staff Sergeant Jack Turner, a 22-year-old tail gunner from Kansas, climbs the narrow ladder into his aircraft. The name painted beneath the cockpit reads Lucky Bell. The paint is chipped. Nothing about the airplane feels lucky today. Inside the bomber, the crew prepares in silence. Lieutenant Robert Hayes, the pilot, studies the mission board one last time before takeoff. The target is deep inside Nazi Germany, Schweinfurt, the heart of Germany's ball-bearing industry. Destroy it, and Hitler's war machine slows. But everyone here knows the truth. The last time the U.S. Army Air Forces flew this route, they lost dozens of bombers. Turner settles into the cramped tail turret. The .50 caliber machine guns in front of him gleam under dim light. He checks the ammunition belts, running gloved fingers along cold brass cartridges. Over the intercom, Hayes speaks. "All right, boys, this is the big one. No one jokes. No one complains, because everyone has already heard the rumor spreading across the airfield. The Germans are waiting." Engines roar to life across the runway. Four massive Wright Cyclone engines shake the bomber as they spin to full power. The vibration runs through the entire aircraft like a living thing. Outside, dozens of B-17s begin rolling forward. From above, the formation looks unstoppable, a silver river of bombers rising into the pale sky. Turner watches them climb through the tail window. Hundreds of aircraft, forming the largest daylight bombing raid yet attempted over Germany. At 20,000 feet, the sky turns brutally clear. That's when the radio crackles. Enemy fighters, 11 o'clock high. Turner tightens his grip on the guns. Dark spakes appear on the horizon. At first they look harmless, distant, almost peaceful. Then the spakes multiply. Dozens, maybe hundreds. German Luftwaffe fighters, Messerschmitt, Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s, diving straight toward the American formation. Turner hears the first pilot shout over the radio. "God, they're everywhere." The sky begins to fill with flak bursts, black explosions tearing open the clouds. Inside Lucky Bell, no one speaks anymore, because every man on board understands one thing. They are now flying alone, deep inside Nazi Germany, and the enemy is closing fast. The first German fighters strike like wolves. They come screaming out of the sun, engines howling as they dive toward the American bombers. The sky suddenly erupts with movement, silver bombers holding formation, while dark fighters slash through them like blades. In the tail turret, Jack Turner feels the entire aircraft shudder. Fighters coming in from 6 o'clock. He shouts into the intercom. His gloved fingers tighten around the twin .50 caliber Browning machine guns. The gun barrels vibrate as he tracks the first attacker, a Messerschmitt Bf-109, diving straight toward the rear of the formation. The German pilot opens fire first. Bright streaks of tracer rounds rip past Turner's turret. Some slam into the tail section of Lucky Bell, punching jagged holes through aluminum skin. "Hold formation," Pilot Hayes orders. But the formation is already breaking apart. Ahead of them, a B-17 suddenly explodes in a violent bloom of smoke and metal. One wing shears away, spinning through empty sky as the rest of the bomber tumbles downward. Turner stares for half a second too long. 8 men just vanished. Another fighter streaks toward him. Turner squeezes the triggers. The Brownings roar to life, their deep mechanical thunder echoing through the fuselage. Brass shell casings spill across the narrow floor of the turret as the guns spit long streams of tracer fire. The Bf-109 flashes past the tail. Turner sees something impossible. The German pilot's face. Goggles, leather helmet. Calm. Then the fighter vanishes beneath the bomber. Over the radio, chaos spreads across the formation. Red 2 is hit. Bomber going down. Parachutes. I see parachutes. Flak bursts now surround them like black thunderclouds. Explosions rock the air around the bombers as anti-aircraft shells detonate at their altitude. Each blast sends razor-sharp fragments screaming through the sky. One explodes close enough to shake Lucky Bell violently. Warning lights flash on the instrument panel. Navigator Charlie Briggs swears under his breath. Hydraulics are dropping. Another fighter appears, this time a Focke-Wulf 190, heavier and deadlier. It charges straight at them from behind. Turner fires again. The 2 streams of .50 caliber tracers stitch across the sky. The fighter tries to break away, but one round finds its mark. A small puff of smoke bursts from the German engine. The fighter rolls violently and dives away. For a moment, Turner breathes again, but when he looks back at the formation, His stomach drops. Half the bombers are gone. Smoke trails stretch across the sky where aircraft once flew in perfect formation. The mission has barely begun, and the Luftwaffe is only getting started. Then a deafening explosion tears through the left side of Lucky Bell. The aircraft jerks violently. Inside the intercom, someone screams, "We've been hit." Turner looks down through the tail window and sees something falling away from the wing. Something huge. Jack Turner's stomach drops as he stares through the tail glass. The left horizontal stabilizer is gone. A jagged section of metal flutters wildly where the tail fin should be steady. Torn aluminum skin whips violently in the freezing air at 24,000 feet. The B-17 begins to roll. Inside the aircraft, warning alarms scream. "Rudder control is gone," shouts Lieutenant Hayes from the cockpit. The bomber lurches violently to the left, the massive aircraft suddenly fighting its own balance. Without the stabilizer, the tail cannot hold steady. Every gust of air pushes the plane sideways. Turner braces himself inside the turret as the sky tilts at a sickening angle. Outside, the battle continues. German fighters streak through the scattered bomber formation, but Lucky Bell is no longer part of it. The damaged aircraft drifts lower, falling behind the protective wall of American guns, and that makes them an easy target. Navigator Charlie Briggs grips his charts tightly. "We're dropping altitude fast," he says, voice tight with fear. The bomb bay doors rattle under the pressure of the slipstream. Ice crystals swirl through. The torn fuselage where flak fragments punch holes through the skin. Then the ball turret gunner, Corporal Danny Ruiz, speaks quietly over the intercom. "I've got two fighters lining up again." Turner looks back. Two dark shapes climb toward them from below. Focke-Wulf 190s. Engines roaring as they close the distance. They know this bomber is wounded. Turner grabs the gun handles. "Come on, come on." The fighters approach head-on from the rear, a dangerous angle. The first German pilot opens fire. Tracer rounds slam into the bomber's tail again, sparks flashing across torn metal. One round punches through the turret glass inches from Turner's helmet. He doesn't flinch. He fires back. The twin Browning .50 caliber machine guns erupt again, hammering the sky with long bursts of fire. The tracers streak directly toward the lead fighter. For a moment, neither pilot brakes. Two men racing toward each other at nearly 600 miles per hour. Then the German fighter suddenly rolls away, narrowly avoiding the deadly wall of bullets. But the second fighter continues its attack. The Focke-Wulf closes to less than 300 yards. Turner squeezes the triggers harder. The bomber shakes under the recoil of the guns. One tracer strikes the fighter's wing root. Another hits the engine cowling. The aircraft bursts into smoke. The German pilot pulls up violently, barely missing the bomber as he climbs away trailing thick black smoke. Turner exhales slowly, but when he looks forward again, his chest tightens. The sky ahead is empty. The American bomber formation has vanished beyond the clouds. Lucky Bell is now completely alone over Nazi Germany, and without its stabilizer, the aircraft may not survive the journey home. In the cockpit, Hayes stares at the shaking control column. The bomber is still losing altitude, and Germany stretches endlessly beneath them. The bomber keeps drifting downward. Inside Lucky Bell, every man feels it, the slow, relentless loss of altitude. The aircraft shudders as cold air screams through torn metal seams. Instruments tremble across the cockpit panel. Lieutenant Robert Hayes grips the control yoke with both hands. Without the left horizontal stabilizer, the B-17 constantly tries to roll and yaw. The controls feel heavy, unpredictable. Every small correction requires strength and perfect timing. "Hold her steady," he mutters, but the airplane fights him. At 21,000 feet, the air grows thicker. The bomber shakes violently as turbulence grabs the damaged tail. In the nose compartment, Bombardier Tom Wallace stares down through the glass. Far below, Germany stretches like a dark patchwork of forests and towns. Enemy territory, hundreds of miles from safety. Over the intercom, Navigator Charlie Briggs speaks again. "We're drifting south. If we keep this heading, we'll pass right over Frankfurt." No one likes that idea. Frankfurt is heavily defended, one of the most dangerous flak zones in the Reich. Then the radio crackles. A German voice cuts through the static. Calm, precise, in English. "American bomber, you are badly damaged." The crew freezes. Turner hears it clearly inside his headset. "Your aircraft cannot survive. You should land." For a moment, no one answers. Then the radio continues. "Follow my fighter. I will guide you to an airfield. You will be treated as prisoners." Turner twists in the turret. A single Messerschmitt Bf 109 appears off their right wing. The German fighter isn't firing. It simply flies beside them, matching their speed. Close enough for the pilot to see inside the bomber. Close enough for the crew to see him raise one gloved hand. A signal, Land. Inside the cockpit, Hayes stares at the crippled instruments. Fuel is dropping. Hydraulic pressure is nearly gone. And the tail could fail at any moment. Bombardier Wallace whispers quietly, "He's right. We may not make it back." For the first time since takeoff, the possibility of survival appears in a different form. Surrender. Prisoner of war. Alive. Silence fills the bomber. Then Hayes speaks. "No." The word is quiet, but absolute. "We didn't come this far to land in Germany." He pushes the throttles forward slightly. The engines roar louder. The bomber begins a slow turn west, back toward England. The German fighter stays beside them for several seconds, watching. Then the pilot shakes his head once and peels away into the clouds. Inside Lucky Bell, the crew knows what that means. They have refused the only safe way out, and the skies over Germany are still full of enemies. Moments later, Turner spots new shapes rising from below. More fighters. This time, they are not offering mercy. The German fighter disappears into the clouds. For a few seconds, the sky around Lucky Bell is strangely quiet. Only the steady roar of four Wright Cyclone engines fills the aircraft, but no one relaxes. Jack Turner scans the empty sky behind the bomber, his eyes burning from cold and tension. Frost creeps across the corners of the tail turret glass. At 20,000 feet, the air temperature is nearly minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Then he sees them. Contacts. 6 o'clock low. Dark shapes climbing fast. Not one, not two, 5. A pack of Focke-Wulf FW-190 fighters. Their radial engines roaring as they rise toward the wounded bomber. They come in formation, confident and aggressive. These pilots know exactly what they're looking at. A crippled B-17 flying fortress, flying alone. Inside the cockpit, Lieutenant Hayes swears quietly, "They're finishing the job." The fighters split into two attack groups. 3 climb high to dive from above. 2 stay low, preparing to rake the bomber from beneath. The trap is perfect. Turner grips the twin .50 caliber Brownings again. Here they come. The first FW-190 dives from above the bomber's left side. Its guns flash instantly. Bright streaks of tracer fire, ripping across the B-17's fuselage. Rounds smash through the aluminum skin. Inside the radio compartment, sparks explode from a shattered panel. Radio's gone. Someone shouts. Another burst punches into the wing root. Fuel sprays briefly into the freezing air before the leak seals itself with ice. Turner opens fire. The machine guns thunder again, shaking the turret as hot brass clatters across the floor. His tracers streak toward the diving fighter. The German pilot pulls away sharply, but the other 4 fighters are already moving in. One roars beneath the bomber, firing upward. Rounds slam into the belly of the aircraft. Down in the ball turret, Corporal Danny Ruiz answers instantly. Twin machine guns erupt from the spinning glass sphere beneath the bomber. Tracers slash upward. The attacking fighter suddenly jerks sideways as rounds tear across its fuselage. Smoke pours from the engine as the pilot dives away. But the victory lasts only seconds. Another FW-190 races directly toward Turner's turret from behind. The closing speed is terrifying. Turner fires. The fighter fires back. 2 streams of tracer rounds collide in the air between them. The German pilot refuses to break away. Closer, closer. At barely 150 yards, Turner sees something chilling. The fighter pilot is smiling. Then a burst of cannon fire slams into the B-17's tail section. The aircraft lurches violently. Metal screams. Inside the cockpit, warning alarms explode across the instrument panel. Hayes fights the controls as the bomber suddenly begins to roll again. Harder this time. Much harder. Behind them, the FW-190 pulls away, satisfied with the damage, because now the crippled bomber begins to spiral slowly downward, and the ground of Nazi Germany is rising fast. The spiral begins slowly. At first, it feels like a heavy turn, something Lieutenant Hayes might still control. But within seconds, the damaged B-17 flying fortress begins to tilt harder, the missing stabilizer allowing the aircraft to slip sideways through the air. The horizon outside the cockpit starts rotating. Counter rudder. Hayes shouts, but there is almost no rudder left to counter. The bomber drops through 18,000 feet, then 17,000. The engines scream as the aircraft loses lift and momentum. Every vibration shakes loose another piece of torn metal. In the tail turret, Jack Turner feels gravity pulling sideways against his body. The sky and clouds spin slowly beyond the glass. "Lieutenant, we're rolling," Turner calls. "I know." Hayes snaps. He pulls the control yoke hard to the right. For a moment, the aircraft resists, then jerks violently in the opposite direction. The damaged tail cannot stabilize the massive bomber anymore. Inside the bomb bay, loose equipment crashes against the metal floor. Navigator Charlie brakes, grips the navigation table to keep from sliding across the compartment. We're dropping fast, he warns. Below them, Germany is no longer distant. Fields and forests are becoming visible through gaps in the clouds. Then something worse happens. Engine number 3 coughs. A deep shudder runs through the wing. Engine 3 losing pressure. The flight engineer reports, voice tight. All pressure falling. Temperature rising. Another engine failure could mean the end. Hayes knows it. The crew knows it. The B-17 was built to survive terrible damage. But not this. Outside, the German fighters circle like hawks above a wounded animal. They don't attack immediately. They watch, waiting for gravity to finish the job. Turner keeps his guns aimed behind them, but the fighters remain just outside his range. Patient, confident. At 14,000 feet, the bomber finally drops below the cloud layer. The ground appears clearly now. German farmland spreads in every direction, villages, rivers, thin roads cutting through forests. Too close, much too close. Hayes wipes sweat from his eyes despite the freezing cockpit. Then he makes a decision. Cut power on engine 3. The flight engineer hesitates. That engine's barely holding us up. If it seizes, we lose the wing, Hayes replies sharply. Seconds pass. Then the lever moves. Engine 3 winds down slowly, its propeller spinning weakly in the rushing wind. The bomber suddenly shudders again, but the spiral slows, just slightly. The aircraft steadies for a moment. Hope flickers across the crew. Maybe, just maybe, the bomber can still stay in the air. But as Turner scans the sky again, his heart sinks, because now something far worse is climbing toward them from the ground. Black bursts of smoke, dozens of them. German flak batteries have spotted the lone bomber, and the anti-aircraft guns below are already firing. The first flak shell explodes just below the bomber. A violent black burst blooms in the air, followed instantly by another, and another. Within seconds, the sky around Lucky Bell fills with jagged clouds of exploding steel. German 88mm anti-aircraft guns have locked onto the lone aircraft, and they are firing everything they have. Inside the B-17, the explosions sound like thunder hitting metal. The bomber shakes violently as shockwaves slam into the fuselage. Shards of steel from the flak bursts slice through the air at deadly speed. Flak, heavy flak. Turner shouts. From the cockpit windows, Lieutenant Hayes can see the problem clearly. The bomber is too low now. Too slow. Perfect target conditions for the ground batteries. A shell detonates just ahead of the nose. The explosion flashes white against the glass, followed by a deafening crack. Fragments tear through the forward fuselage. Bombardier Tom Wallace cries out, "Shrapnel! I'm hit!" Blood stains the sleeve of his flight jacket, but he stays conscious, gripping the nose frame as the aircraft bucks violently again. Another flak burst explodes near the right wing. Metal fragments rip through the engine cowling of engine 2. The engine sputters. For a terrifying second, it looks like the propeller might stop. But the engine roars back to life, coughing black smoke into the cold air. In the tail turret, Turner struggles to keep his gun steady as the bomber rattles. Through the storm of explosions, every blast feels like it might tear the aircraft apart. Altitude, Hayes shouts. Navigator Briggs checks the gauge. 10,000 feet. That's dangerously low for a bomber over Germany. Below them, the countryside is now painfully clear. Roads, farmhouses, even moving vehicles. Somewhere down there, thousands of German soldiers are watching the crippled bomber fight for its life. Then Turner spots movement again in the sky behind them. At first, he thinks it's another fighter attack, but the shapes are different, bigger, familiar, silver wings catching the sunlight. Turner leans closer to the glass. For a moment, he isn't sure he believes what he's seeing. Then he grabs the intercom. "Lieutenant, I see aircraft." Hayes doesn't turn. "What kind?" Turner squints hard through the frost. Then he feels a surge of disbelief and relief at the same time. B-17s. The shapes grow larger through the flak-filled sky. A formation. American bombers. Dozens of them. The returning bomber group from the Schweinfurt mission. And they are flying directly toward the lone, crippled aircraft. But there's a problem. The formation is already surrounded by German fighters. If Lucky Bell joins them now, it means flying straight back into the battle they barely escaped. Inside the cockpit, Hayes grips the controls tightly. The bomber group ahead may be their only chance to reach England alive. But reaching them could also destroy what little remains of the aircraft, and the flak is still exploding all around them. The formation grows larger through the smoke-filled sky. Dozens of B-17 flying fortresses thunder westward, their silver wings reflecting weak sunlight through the clouds. They are battered too. Several bombers trail smoke. Others fly with torn fuselage panels and wounded engines. The Schweinfurt raid has clearly been a massacre. But to the crew of Lucky Bell, that formation looks like salvation. Jack Turner grips the intercom. They're maybe 2 miles out. Inside the cockpit, Lieutenant Hayes studies the distance carefully. The damaged bomber is barely holding steady at 9,000 feet. One engine shut down, the tail barely intact. To reach the formation, they must climb slightly, and climbing means slowing down. Slowing down makes them vulnerable, but staying alone means certain death. Hayes makes the decision. Give me everything we've got. The flight engineer pushes the remaining engines harder. The 3 Wright Cyclone engines roar louder, propellers biting into the cold air. The B-17 shudders as it begins a painful climb. Every loose rivet seems to scream. Turner watches the sky behind them. The German fighters notice immediately. 2 Messerschmitt Bf-109s break away from the distant formation battle and dive toward the wounded bomber. They're coming back. Turner warns. The fighters close fast, but this time, something unexpected happens. The American bomber formation sees Lucky Bell. A group of B-17s breaks slightly from formation, spreading their gun coverage like a shield. Dozens of .50 caliber machine guns suddenly swivel toward the incoming fighters. The sky erupts in defensive fire. Long streams of tracer rounds cut across the air between the fighters and the crippled bomber. The German pilots hesitate. The wall of gunfire is too dense. They break away, climbing sharply to avoid the deadly storm of bullets. Turner exhales in disbelief. The formation closes around them now. A protective circle of bombers, each aircraft covering the others with overlapping gunfire. For the first time since entering Germany, Lucky Bell is no longer alone. Inside the cockpit, Hayes feels the controls. Steady slightly as the bomber finds smoother air inside the formation. Navigator Briggs checks their heading. If we hold this course, we'll reach the North Sea in about 40 minutes. 40 minutes still inside enemy territory. Still under threat, but it's a chance. The crew says nothing for several moments. Each man simply listens to the steady roar of the engines and the distant thunder of flak behind them. Jack Turner finally looks out through the tail glass again. Germany slowly fades beneath the clouds. The wounded bomber continues west, scarred, broken, but still flying, and refusing to die.